Weepa weep, grana weep, nitty bong, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things Transformers and Transformers action figure related. And today on my channel we're going to take a look at something that I get asked fairly regularly on this channel, and that is, what is the difference between all of the size scales when it comes to Transformers in 2021? Now this all starts back in the G1 days, because anybody who owned Transformers back in the G1 days knows you were taking a leap of faith every time you bought a Transformer when it came to the scale and size. And one of the Transformers that really does represent this extremely well is Blaster. Now if we take a look at Blaster here, we know that he is in the movie about the same size, or maybe a little bit smaller than Prime, but then when it comes to the figure, oh good lord, oh dear me, this does not scale very well at all. Prime is like a mini one. Now we know why this is. This is because Hasbro took a load of bots from different manufacturers and toy lines and put them all together under the banner of Transformers. So nothing really scaled the way that it did in the cartoon. Now come to the Beast Wars element of this, and Hasbro decided, as they were going to have a little bit more control over this, that they wanted classes. So they had basic class, they were the smallest ones, they had deluxe class, they had the mega class but slightly bigger, then they had the super class and only one bot falls into that. Then afterwards they had the ultra class, and these were all at different price points, so you knew if something was at a certain price point it was also at a certain scale, and that controlled the amount of paint and also accessories that would come with. And that continued on basically for years and years and years, with a few variations on the theme as you go through, but mostly this was the way that it looked and the way that it stayed. Now recently they've kept some of these naming conventions, but now we have Battle-Masters, Micro-Masters, Deluxe, Voyager, Leader, Titan, and also the Core class. Now just at a glance you would think, well, what's the difference? Everything is still the same, but when you take a deeper dive into it these days, actually it's not, because Deluxe and things like that actually just mean scale these days. It's not a specific size, it is a price point, but there's a scale within it, and that's the same as you go into Titan, Commander. There's different variations, which is now why they call it a scale. So let's take a deep dive into these and have a little look at what we mean by these different naming conventions. So the first one I want to take a look at here is the newest one, which is the Core class. So currently we only have about 3, maybe 4 figures that sit within the Core class. This is the Megatron one, and these are very small transforming figures. These are bigger than your Micromasters and the Battle-Masters that we're not going to take a look at here because they just sit within their own specific thing. Personally, I'm not as interested in them, but the Core class here sits under what used to be Legend scale. So you can see a Mech Fans Toys Legend scale figure behind him there, and we will talk more about the Legends scale right at the end of the video if that's something you're interested in, as Hasbro isn't really focusing on that anymore. So the Core class are very small, about knee high to a Voyager. Next up will be the Deluxe. Now this is where scales start to come in. So we can see a Wheeljack here, and Wheeljack is fairly nice. But then when we bring Cliffjumper in, Cliffjumper also sits in Deluxe figures, and we can see there's a massive height difference. And then when we bring a Voyager class in, we can also see that there's a massive difference here between the height. Now this is why it's a scale, and personally I believe a lot of it comes down to the amount of accessories that come with the figure as well. So Wheeljack came with, he's tall, but he only comes really with one kind of accessory. Cliffjumper is smaller, but Cliffjumper does come with a big gun and also some sleds for the bottom of his alt mode, so that it looks like he can ski on the water. So you can see when you buy Deluxe now, you're not just buying the size of a figure like historically you would have been, you're actually buying the components that go with it. Then we can step it up to Voyager. So here we have two Megatrons. Both of these are in the Voyager mode, and both of them are the same kind of height. They're a very similar mold. One is Earthrise and the other one is for Siege. Now that's fine for Megatron. You know that you're going to get the same Megatron, but these two figures are Siege and Earthrise Optimus Prime, but one is a leader class and one is a Voyager class. Now the Siege one, which is the one with all of the cell shading, he is currently sitting at the Voyager class, whereas the other one sits at what we will go into next, which is the leader class, and this is because he comes with a trailer. So again, we're talking about parts that come with a figure. Another person who sits within this realm is also good old Astro Train. Now this figure in the bot mode is very small. I mean, he's a really great figure, and there's a lot of transformation and a lot of engineering that's gone into him, and he stands about the same height as your Soundwave, so you can see that he's kind of Voyager height. And then we bring good old Megs out, and he stands, even though he's Voyager, he stands bigger than the pair of them. So again, leader class is really how much junk they bring with their trunk, and Astro Train brings a lot of junk with that trunk. Then we can skip next one over to Commander class. So in Commander class are fairly large figures. So we have Jetfire and we also have Skylynx here. Both of these huge figures, and you would expect that when we sit things in Commander class then that we're pretty set in our ways. We now know that they're going to be a certain height, because you can see both of these figures in a height module are both actually quite large figures, which is great, and actually both their alt modes very similar in size. Now this is great, this is fine, until, as always, now we have something else that sits within Commander class, or that Commander class price point, and that is the new Rodimus Prime. So again, now we revert back to how much junk, how much stuff actually comes with the figure, rather than the size or the height of the figure. I believe probably that the alt mode is going to be as long as, say, a Skylynx or a Jetfire, but this one, the figure that comes with it is a Voyager figure. The rest of the scaling on it sits with how much junk comes in his trunk again, and with a Commander class it has to be even more junk than a leader junk. The largest of all the classes and the current waves from Hasbro has to be the Titan class. One of the biggest is still Metroplex that sits in this, and I know that was from a previous wave, and Scorponok is one of the latest ones, but there's a huge difference actually between the size of Scorponok and even Metroplex. So here, again, we're sitting on a scale. So just because it's Titan class doesn't mean that it's going to be a rather large one. We can see, compared to Commander class, that it is much bigger. Very much bigger, and we can see, looking at Scorponok here, that when we drop in some figures next to him, we will see that he is very tall still. So you can see here that you have a Deluxe figure here. Again, this is one of the smaller size Deluxe figures, looking at this one. And then when we also drop in a Voyager figure here as well, you'll see that Voyager figures are actually about knee high to a Scorponok here, which isn't bad. And if you're looking at G1 versions, the scale is off still here, but if you take a look at the Transformers Netflix series, then you'll see actually the scale is probably about right. But again, this is a class and there's a scale here. The Arc has just been mentioned, and the Arc actually is going to be smaller than Scorponok, I'm led to believe, and will actually stand just taller than a Devastator was. So again, the Titans are a scale. You always need to check it out and see how big it is. Now, the biggest of the Titans is this bad boy here, and that of course is Unicron, the biggest Transformer ever created by Hasbro. Very nice looking figure, but actually, again, if we're talking scale, He's not as big as you'd think he'd be. When we put him next to Fort Max, he's only a couple of inches bigger than Fort Max. Still the biggest TF ever, but not as big as you would think. So you can see, again, Titans are a scale. Sitting outside of the main line is the Masterpiece scale. Now, Masterpiece scale is where they do try to scale everything correctly. So if you buy something from the Masterpiece line, it should scale how you would think from your original G1 cartoon. So if you really do care about scale, this is actually one of the safest lines to collect because you are 100% guaranteed that everything will scale on your shelf. Also, this makes it fairly safe to pick up bots from third party. This is where they came in because a lot of the third parties actually make bots that scale really well with your Masterpiece scale ones. So people like your X-Trans bots, they're going to make figures that will sit in with your Hasbro figures very nicely on your shelf, and they all scale perfectly together. So the one outlier here that I've spoke about on this channel fairly regularly that Hasbro seems to have forgotten about is the Legends scale. And Legends scale, there are some fantastic third-party companies doing awesome stuff in this Legends scale. The first one that's on the screen here being the Iron Factory. They do awesome stuff. If you have to look at where this sits, this tends to sit within between what we saw was core scale and where we tended to see the deluxe scale. So this sits perfectly in between those two brackets, and the figures that are in this are awesome. They are doing some fantastic work, like I said, from the likes of Iron Factory and also from New Age, who are doing some awesome work around Galvatron this year. Multiple versions of this. They've also done a Straxus, a Shattered Glass Megatron, and they do awesome things all day long. These things transform very well and just look great on their shelves. At this price point, at this level, with this amount of detail, I think the Legends scale Transformers are really doing a lot to push the boundaries forward of what Transformers are actually doing in 2021. One little addition would be Dr. Wu, who you can see here makes something even smaller than your core class. So there's always some kind of addition, somebody doing something a little bit different. We will see what happens with that as they release more figures. So hopefully this video has helped you and now you understand more what I'm talking about when I'm saying Masterpiece scale, Legend scale, Deluxe scale, or Commander scale. It's a scale. It really does depend on how much stuff they come with. It no longer really talks about the size, which is a bit of a shame, I guess, if you're trying to just pick up one size of figures. Let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments. Do you wish these things were a lot more easier to work out, or do you think it's just a price grab in certain areas? Let me know and I'll see you in my next video. Alright guys, in a bit. Peace!